Namo Buddhaya. Welcome to today's Sutta study. So today we're going to learn a sutta from the Anguttara Nikaya of the Pali Canon. And the name of the sutta is called Kusinara Sutta. Okay. It's found in Anguttara Nikaya in the Book of the Tenths. So I thought it's quite important to learn this sutta because if a person practices this teaching of the Buddha, then it really helps that person to correct many things in his life and to restrain himself from doing things that would make him fall into the planes of misery. As you know, our great teacher Supreme Buddha has taught that in this long journey of samsara, most of the time we are reborn in bad worlds, like the hell world, like the ghost world, like the animal world, and the Titan world. So it's very rarely that we are reborn as humans. The Supreme Buddha explains these fourfold hell is like our home. Like, what's the nature of the home? Every time we go out from home, whether we go to the school, whether we go to the office, whether we go shopping, we always keep on coming back home, right? In this journey of samsara, the Supreme Buddha teaches our home is the fourfold hell. So even if you're reborn in a good world for maybe one life, again and again, we are more prone to falling back into those planes of misery. That is the danger of going in this samsara. So one of the things that that makes us fall into this samsara or make us fall into these planes of misery is because we are not able to control our speech, we are not able to control our mind, and we're not able to control our actions. So today we're going to discuss a certain aspect of that. And if a person practices this Dhamma concept or this Dhamma teaching, then that will really help that person to control himself. Okay. So now in the Dhamma, great teacher Supreme Buddha teaches that if someone points out one of our faults, if someone points out one of our faults, then the Supreme Buddha teaches then that is like a person showing us a hidden treasure. If a person shows us one of our faults, then it's considered as if showing a treasure. And the Supreme Buddha teaches you should associate with such people who shows you your mistakes. Okay? And in the same way, then the Supreme Buddha praises, pointing out a fault of others so that that person can correct himself. So that is also, if we take it on our part, then if we also help somebody to correct oneself, then that is in accordance with the Dhamma, right? If people don't show our mistakes, then sometimes we won't be able to recognize what our weaknesses and what our faults are. So it is a good thing, right? But as ordinary people who are going in this samsara, the nature of this mind, the nature of this mind is that this mind always sees other people's faults. Right? It easily sees, it easily catches other people's faults, and we easily accuse people of wrongdoings. We easily reprove them of wrongdoings, and we easily insult and complain about other people's wrongdoings. So that is a different thing. Okay. So this ordinary mind has a nature of seeing the faults of others. And when we see other people's faults, when other people are not behaving the way we are expecting them to, or when others are not doing what we are asking them to, then we see themselves, we find themselves as doing something wrong, right? And we always uh, tell them about their weaknesses, and we always tell them, you always like this, you do that. Those kinds of words, those kinds of behaviors are pretty much um, always present in an ordinary person's life, right? However, the Supreme Buddha teaches, when we reprove someone, or when we accuse, or when we show somebody of one's mistakes, there is a certain condition that we should abide by when doing so. If we don't abide by these conditions, then what happens is we act according to our impulses, we act according to our emotions, and we blurt out words, we say words, we behave in a wrong way, and that leads to much misery. Okay? So this is really a good life lesson for all of us, right? If a person practices this, it will really help that person, and it will give a person something to think when the next time you see someone doing something wrong, and the next time you feel like telling that person, okay, this is wrong, this is something wrong that you're doing, this sutta will give something for you to think before you go on and say anything. Okay. So during this time, our great teacher, the Supreme Buddha, was living in Kusinara. And at that moment, the Supreme Buddha teaches bhikkhus, a bhikkhu who wishes to reprove another person. So reprove another person means show another person's mistake or accuse another person of doing something wrong. Okay. So this is taught to bhikkhus, but so you can relate this to yourselves, okay? Because a bhikkhu who wishes to reprove another person should examine himself with respect to 5 things. If a bhikkhu wants to reprove another, that person should examine himself with respect to 5 things and establish 5 things in himself before he reproves the other person. So what should he do? He should examine himself in relation to 5 things, and then he should establish himself in another 5 things, and then only should he reprove another person. So now this everybody teaches what are these 5 things that you should examine about yourself first. The first is bhikkhus. A bhikkhu who wishes to reprove another should examine himself thus. Is my bodily behavior pure? So before you reprove somebody of another, before you reprove another person of their mistake, you should examine yourself and see, is my bodily actions pure? Do I have any bodily behavior that is, do I possess bodily behavior that is pure, flawless, and irreproachable? So do I behave in a way that is pure, that is flawless, so that nobody can accuse me of anything? Right? Now, the nature of our mind is we don't usually think about ourselves. We quickly, the moment we see somebody else's mistake, we quickly point our fingers out at that person. But we never take a moment to think, do I also behave like that? Do I also make that same mistake? We don't think like that. But the Supreme Buddha teaches, before you point your finger at somebody else, examine yourself and see, how do I behave? How is my physical actions? Do I have pure, flawless actions such that nobody can ever complain or accuse me of any wrongdoing? So you should examine this and see. Because remember that if the bhikkhu's bodily behavior is not pure, so that means if he does wrong things to his body, and if he does not possess bodily behavior that is pure, flawless, and irreproachable, then others will say to him, before pointing out others' faults, first fix yourself. Right? That's why if you're someone who makes mistakes in life, then it's very difficult for you to show mistakes of others, because others can easily tell you back, why don't you correct yourself first before telling us, right? So that's why there's a remember the teachers, before you tell somebody of others, if before you tell someone of their mistakes, ask yourself whether you have the qualification to do so, whether your actions are pure. This is something to think about. Okay? Because sometimes while we are making the same mistakes, when others make the same mistake, then we find it to be so inappropriate, and then we point our fingers at that person. Okay, so next time you try to point out the weakness of somebody else, you should first ask yourself, do I have the qualification? Is my actions pure? Okay, so in order for you to have this qualification, then what you need to do is you should always pay attention to your bodily actions and make sure that you live a pure, flawless life in terms of your bodily actions. That means you should not be someone who kills living beings. You should not ever steal. You should not ever engage in any fraud. You should not engage in any sexual misconduct. And in any way, you should not be doing anything wrong. Because remember the teachers, one of the characteristics of someone who leads a flawless life is he has fear of doing the slightest wrong thing. So even if it's something very little, he's always scared that he might make even a little mistake in terms of his physical actions. He always wants to keep his sila, he always wants to keep his virtue very, very pure without a minute error. So that is called a person who has flawless actions, flawless sila, I guess you could say. So when you're protecting your precepts, you have to be very mindful, and you have to make a great effort to make sure that you don't make even the slightest fault. So for that, you need to be very mindful about your sila. Now, for you to understand this, I'll give you an example. Now, there were two bhikkhunis. Okay, there were two bhikkhunis, and the two of them went to the river in order to take a bath. Okay, and when they were taking a bath, what happened was a crocodile came and grabbed one of the bhikkhunis, and the crocodile took her and swam quickly into the deep water. And when the bhikkhuni was screaming, and when the other bhikkhuni was asking for help, there was a young man who was very strong, and he quickly decided to help the bhikkhuni, and he jumped into the water and he started swimming towards the bhikkhuni. Okay. Now, the bhikkhuni is caught to the crocodile. Now she's in so much pain, blood is coming out. But when she saw that a man is coming to save her, Do you know what she said? She said, she called that man, and he said, no, don't come near me. It's not appropriate for a man to touch me, because she's observing the precept of celibacy. So she said it's not appropriate for a man to touch me. And so she asked that man not to come near her. So even although her life was in danger, she decided to keep her sila pure more than her life. So do you see how much of an effort you need to make in order to keep your sila flawless? So she didn't want her pure celibate life to be spoiled even by something so slight. Right? So that is called keeping your sila flawless, keeping your actions flawless. Okay, no matter even if your life is in danger. Okay, the noble disciple who wants to protect the precepts flawlessly, he would sacrifice his life in order to protect the precept. He would not make the slightest mistake. For example, during Supreme Buddha's time, the Supreme Buddha has said not to destroy trees, or not to root out trees or vines. That's one of the precepts. And when one of the monks were going in the forest, I think a wild dog or a wild animal started to uh, chase him, and that monk got tangled in some of the vines, and he could not run. So he fell down and he got tangled. His leg got tangled in some of the vines. And now the only thing he needs to do to save himself from the wild dog is he needs to break the vines, right? Unless he break tear the vines, he can't run away. But then he remembered, no, the Buddha has said not to destroy even vines. And so at that moment, even to say, he put his sila first before his life. And he did not tear those vines. But afterwards, when the Supreme got to know that the Supreme changed the precept and said, if there's a danger to life, you can do that. But that's just an example for you to understand that if a person protects precepts without any flaw, then he's so mindful, and even if his life is in danger, he would not break the precepts. That is a flawless life. Okay, so this is everybody that teaches, before you reprove somebody, ask yourself whether are you pure in your actions. Okay, that's the first. The second thing that you need to examine before you reprove someone is, this is everyone that teaches. Again, a bhikkhu who wishes to reprove another should examine himself thus. Is my verbal behavior pure? Do I possess verbal behavior that is pure, flawless, and irreproachable? Does this quality exist in me or not? So ask it before you reprove somebody else. Ask yourself, is my verbal actions pure? Like, sometimes if somebody is saying harsh words to another person, we would go and say, don't say that. Why are you doing it? Why are you saying words to hurt him? But before you say that, you should ask yourself, do I do this? When I get angry, do I say harsh words to hurt other people's feelings? Right? So when the teachers, ask yourself this and see. If your verbal actions are not pure, if they are not flawless, then others will say, please, first train yourself first before you point out your finger at others. Okay? So before you reprove somebody, the second thing you should examine is my verbal actions pure? Do I lie? Am I someone who lies? Am I someone who say things to break people's friendships? Do I say things to break people's harmony? Do I say harsh words that hurt other people's feelings? Okay. And do I say empty words? Do I just go on rambling about nothing? Okay. Is my words pure? Is my words flawless? Am I someone who only speaks the truth? Am I someone who speaks at the right time? Do I speak meaningful things? Okay, so you should examine this through yourself and see. Because if you don't have this component in your life, then if you reprove others, then that person can uh, talk back to you and say that you should first develop yourself before pointing the fingers to others. That's the second. Okay. The third factor that you should examine within yourself is a bhikkhu who wishes to reprove another should examine himself thus. That is, have I established a mind of loving kindness without resentment towards my fellow monks? Does this quality exist in me or not? If the bhikkhu has not established a mind of loving kindness without resentment towards his fellow monks, then his fellow monks can say, please, first, establish a mind of loving kindness towards your fellow monks before pointing your fingers at others. Okay, so the third thing is before you reprove someone, you have to make sure that you are doing so with a mind of loving kindness. So if your mind is filled with anger, if your mind is filled with resentful feelings, then just remember the teachers, you don't have the qualification to reprove another. Right now, most of the time in the ordinary day or for the ordinary person, when we see a person's fault, the first thing that happens, what's the first thing that happens to us when we see somebody else's fault?
We will get angry.
Yes, that's the first thing that happens. Right? So the moment we get angry, we are not going to examine either of these three things. Why? Because remember the teachers, kuddho attan janati, kuddho attan na passati. Once a person gets angry, that person cannot see the reality. He cannot see what is beneficial for himself or others. So right there, all of these are destroyed. Okay, so this remember the teachers, the third factor that you should examine is before you reprove somebody, you should ask yourself, do I have a mind of loving kindness right now, or do I have a mind of hatred? So once you figure, if you find that your mind is filled with anger, then are you qualified to reprove another? No. You don't have the right qualifications to reprove another. Okay. So this is something that this is something that really makes us think. Okay. So the next time you see somebody else's fault and you feel like telling that person or point out your finger at them, ask yourself, now am I angry or not? Am I saying this with anger or not? And if you find yourself that you're filled with anger, okay, then if you're mindful, at least, if you can remember the Dhamma, then you should realize that no, this is not the right time to say it. Okay, that is the third one. So one of the one of the things now, when we are living together with people, right, not everybody's perfect. Everybody makes mistakes. Everybody has their weaknesses, right? But if you're a subordinate, then you have to kind of accept and live with other people's weaknesses. However, if you're someone who is high up in the line, or for example, if it's in your family, you're the controller of the family, or if you're in the work environment, you're the boss, or you're one of the managers, or you're one of the top people in the hierarchy. So in such situations, what happens is you always try to control everything. So once a person gets that mentality of controlling everything, everything has to be the way you want. Everybody has to listen to what you say. So once you get that mentality, then this anger pops up very quickly. Yeah, so you have to be very careful about this. So when you're top in the hierarchy, then when your co-workers or when your family members makes mistakes, then you get angry very often, and uh, you see other people's faults even more often. Okay? So something that we should realize then is that we can't control others, no matter how much we think we can. You realize we can't. If we can't control our own selves, how can we control others? So if a person has this mentality of controlling others, then that is a very negative quality that will impact you in a negative way. It's something that you should definitely try to change in your life. Don't try to control others. Don't try to put your authority on others. Okay? If you have a responsibility, then do the responsibility to the best that you can without trying to put your authority on others in a negative way. Okay? Because it will only affect you in a negative way. So one of the reasons that we get angry and we yell when people do wrong things. Sometimes we have seen some bosses, they throw away their files, right? Because of anger. Because if one of the workers have done something wrong, they throw away the file. We have seen such things. So instead, the Supreme Buddha teaches, if you realize that your mind is filled with anger at that moment, then it's best that you do not reprove that person at that time. Okay, because you don't have the qualifications to do so. That's the third one. So ask yourself whether your mind is filled with anger or not. And the fourth is the Supreme Buddha teaches. Now, the Supreme Buddha teaches this to bhikkhus. Okay. So the Supreme Buddha teaches, before you reprove another, ask yourself, am I someone who is well learned in the Dhamma? Do I have a good Dhamma knowledge? That means if you have a good Dhamma knowledge, then you know what is right, what is wrong, the good from bad. You're well versed in Dhamma. So ask yourself, do I have a good knowledge of the Dhamma? Okay, that's the fourth one. And the fifth one is, ask yourself, do I have a good knowledge about the monastic rules? So that is, bhikkhus and bhikkhunis have monastic rules that they have to abide by, right? So do I have a good knowledge? Do I have a very clear knowledge about all of those monastic rules? For example, for a bhikkhuni, there are 311 precepts. So do I have uh, a full, clear knowledge about all those monastic rules? Right? Because if you don't know about the monastic rules, if you don't know how those rules are broken, then how can you reprove another person of their mistakes? right? They will say, "Oh, you don't even know the monastic rules." They won't give any credit to what you say. But if you're someone who's well versed in the monastic rules, if you're someone who's well versed in the Dhamma, if you know the Dhamma well, then when you point out somebody else's fault, then they will give that some weight, because they know that you're a very knowledgeable person. Okay, so before you reprove somebody of something, you have to make sure that you're well versed in the Dhamma and the monastic rules. So as a layperson, then you should know, you should have a good knowledge about the precepts. Okay, at least the 5 precepts and the 8 precepts, what they are, how they are broken, right? And full knowledge about the precepts. So then at any moment you can answer any questions about the precepts if anybody has any doubts, and you can prove how that precept is broken by another person, right? So you should have good knowledge, the precepts and the Dhamma. So remember the teachers, these are the 5 things that you should examine yourself before reproving another person. So now see whether you have ever examined like this before you make an accusation or before you reprove somebody. Have you ever examined yourself to see whether you have these 5 things? Most of the time, the answer would be no, right? The ordinary mind, the moment we see somebody else's faults, what happens is we blurt out whatever that comes to our mind, we say it. We never think about ourselves, whether, do I have the qualification to show or point out another person's mistakes? We don't think like that. But at least after we learn this Dhamma, right, if a person can use this Dhamma and practice it in his life, then that will really help that person to keep his words and his actions very controlled. It will give something for that person to think before he goes on and accuse someone of wrongdoing. Okay, so the Supreme Buddha teaches then, so these are the 5 things that you should examine yourself before reproving another person. Then what are the 5 things that you should establish yourself in? The Supreme Buddha teaches, the first thing that you should establish yourself in before reproving another is you should reprove another person at the right time. Okay? If you're pointing out somebody else's mistakes, if you're accusing someone, if you're complaining about somebody's behavior, then you should do so at the right time. Okay, the Supreme Buddha praises. The Supreme Buddha praises pointing out another person's mistakes at the right time. In one of the suttas, the Supreme Buddha teaches like this. Once a Brahmin named Potaliya, he comes to the Supreme Buddha and he sits down, and the Supreme Buddha asks, Potaliya, there are these 4 kinds of persons in this world. What are these 4 people? There's one type of people, and those people, they speak dispraise of somebody who actually deserves dispraise, and the dispraise is accurate, truthful, and timely. But he does not speak praise of someone who deserves praise, though the praise would be accurate, truthful, and timely. So there are some people in this world who dispraise others, but they don't praise They dispraise others, but they do not praise others. Okay. Then this way with the teachers, there are some type of people, they praise others who deserve praise, and that praise is accurate, truthful, and timely. But they do not speak dispraise of others who deserves dispraise, although that dispraise is accurate, truthful, and timely. So it's the opposite of the first one. Understand? The first one, what does he do? He dispraises others, but he never praises others. He dispraises those who deserves dispraise, but he never praises others. The second type of people is he praises others who deserve praise, but he never dispraises others. The third is there's another type of people, and what they do is they do not dispraise others who deserve dispraise, and he does not praise others who deserve praise. So he neither praises nor dispraises. That's the third type of people. And then, the same with the teachers, there's another type of people. What they do is they dispraise others who deserve dispraise, and the dispraise is accurate, truthful, and timely. And he also speaks praise of others who deserves praise, and the praise is accurate, truthful, and timely. So that person, he dispraises others at the right time, accurately, and he praises others who deserves praise, and it's the truth, it's accurate, and it is done timely. Just remember the teachers, these are the 4 kinds of people. Now, of these 4 kinds of people, who seems most excellent to you? Of these 4 kinds of people, who seems most excellent to you? Now, if you ask this question, how would you answer? Who's the best? What type of people are the best? The first one, the second one, the third one, and the fourth one. Okay, so you all are smarter than Potaliya. So Potaliya, he replied when the women asked this, Potaliya said, Venerable Sir, I think the third type is the most excellent. Those people who neither praises nor dispraises, they are the best, because I think equanimity is the best. Because he saw those people as having equanimity. That means being neutral. They don't praise nor dispraise. Okay. But the Supreme Buddha teaches, no, Potaliya, the fourth type is the best. The fourth type is the best. Why? Because knowing the right time to praise, knowing the right time to dispraise, that is what is worthy. So remember the teachers, when you praise someone, you should praise that person at the right time. And also, if you dispraise someone, you should dispraise that person at the right time, not at the wrong time. Okay, so there is no point of going on telling other people about other people's faults. However, if there's someone that you can tell that to, and if you tell that person, then that fault can be fixed, then that is the right time, that is the right person whom you say it to. Understand? So there are certain instances where you should reveal the faults of others so that it can benefit others. Okay? Because there might be people who have formed a pleasant mind about those who you should not have a pleasant mind about. Right? So in certain situations, at the right time, you should reveal about their faults so that those people can be corrected. There's no point in going on and telling everybody, everywhere you go, about faults of others, but you should reveal those faults at the right time, in the right place. Okay, so in that way, the Supreme Buddha teaches, before you reprove somebody of their mistakes, you should do so at the right time. Is this the right time to tell that person? Right? For example, if you want to point out one of their mistakes, find out, is he in a good mental state, right? If he's in a very busy environment, that is not the right time to tell him those things, right? Or if he's very sick, that is not the right time to tell him. So you have to find the right time to tell him. That is something that you should establish on yourself, on your part. That's the first one. Okay, so when you reprove somebody, you should reprove that person at the right time. Okay, so the wise people, they always speak at the right time. Then the second is, you should establish yourself in truth. So you have to make sure what you're saying is the truth. Right? Now we can accuse others of wrongdoings falsely. Sometimes people accuse others of wrongdoings without investigating. That is also another uh, big weakness in people. Some people accuse others by hearsay. If somebody else said, oh, so and so did it, you just quickly believe it. You should not believe. You should investigate and see, does this person actually have this fault? Right? Or sometimes from first glance, if you're just looking from the outside, that person might be that person might seem to be doing something wrong. But actually, if we go and find out why he's doing it, we realize that he's doing it for a reason. Right? So you should never judge a person from outside. You should investigate and find out why he's doing it without falsely accusing others. Okay, so don't believe people by mere say, right? Before you accuse someone, before you show out one of their weaknesses, find out whether this is true. Okay, and then point out his mistakes. So that's the second one, is always make sure what you're telling is the truth, that you are not making a false accusation based on what you have heard or what you have seen. Okay, so before you do it, investigate and see. That is the second. Before the second thing you should establish yourself on before reproving another. Then the third one is, remember the teachers, when you know, this is one of the hardest. When you reprove others, this remember the teachers, this is the third factor you should establish yourself, and that is, you should speak to them gently, not harshly. Now, normally when we see somebody doing something wrong, do we point out their faults nicely to them? No. We yell at them, we talk to them in a very high voice, right? So is that accordance with the Dhamma? No. Right? So if a person can follow this Dhamma, then that is called Dhamma practice. This is called Dhamma practice, following these conditions before you point out somebody else's fault, then it's called Dhamma practice. So next time you do so, establish yourself in this third factor, and that is when you're showing somebody else's faults, talk to them gently. So in order to talk to them gently, you need to make sure that you're not angry. So that's why the teachers in the previous five factors, if you don't have a mind of loving kindness, then you don't have the qualification to reprove another. Because if you are saying it angrily, then definitely you're going to use harsh words, and you would use a high voice. to show that person's mistake. Okay. So the third thing is you need to talk to that person gently. Now, if you all can practice these things in your family lives, right, it will really create harmony within you. Like if you're a mother, if you're a father, when you see your kids' mistakes, when you see your kids' faults, most of the time what you do is you yell at them, right? You shout at them, and you raise your voice at them. Sometimes, um, I guess you do it because they don't listen, but uh, according to the Dhamma, the way you should do so is you should talk to them in a gentle way, in a way that they understand, and try to teach them what they're doing is wrong in a gentle way without yelling at them. Because when you're yelling at another person, right, you're doing so with a mind of anger for sure. And so that creates really bad karma at the end. Right? Your mind is upset, you're upset, the person who's listening to those words is upset, right? Nobody's happy. But if you point out a fault gently, then that person might be more prone to listening to you, and you're also happy, and the person who's listening is also happy. So that is the third one. And the fourth is when you're pointing the fault of another to another person, you should do so for his benefit. Right? Your intention should be to make him better. That should be your intention. Not to make him under your control, not to insult him in front of others, right? Not to make him look bad in front of others, not to ruin his reputation. If you point out another person's fault, inside of you, you should have a good heart, and that is, you should do so, or may he correct himself and go in the right path. That should be your intention. Okay, so that is the fourth thing that you should establish yourself in. So now, so far we talked about four factors that you should establish yourself in. The first one is when you reprove somebody, you should do so at the right time. The second is you should do so, you should reprove somebody based on the truth. The third one is you should do so gently. And the fourth is you should do so for their benefit. And the last one is, remember the teachers, when you reprove somebody, you should do so with loving kindness and not having hatred within you. You should establish yourself in loving kindness before you reprove another. So those are the 5 factors that you should establish yourself before reproving another. Because a bhikkhu who wishes to reprove another person should examine himself with respect to these 5 things and establish these 5 things in himself before he reproves the other person. Okay, so if we practice this Dhamma, then it will really help us to be happy. It will help others to be happy, and it will maintain harmony. And not only that, it will really help us from collecting bad karma in our life. Because when we see other people making mistakes, right? If we reprove others, if we show their mistakes without establishing ourselves in these 5 factors and examining these 5 factors within us, then what we do is most of the time when we see other people's faults, we yell at them, right? We quickly, impulsively accuse them, right? And we make false accusations without investigating, right? All of those things lead to bad karma. And those wrongdoings can quickly drag us down to the plains of misery. For you to understand this, I'll give you an example. Now, you all, I'm sure, have heard of the Arahant Theri Ambapali. She was one of the Arahant Bhikkhunis in the Buddha's dispensation. But before she became a Bhikkhuni, she was a courtesan. So in other words, she was a prostitute. So that is not a good job. Now, do you know the reason why she became a prostitute? Many lives back, I can't remember in which Buddha's dispensation, but long time back in one of the previous Buddha's dispensations, she was ordained. She was ordained in that Buddha's dispensation, and she was very clean. Now clean people also have this problem. Okay, clean people, when they like to keep everything nice and tidy and clean, and the moment somebody dirties, they get angry. Okay, so it's good to be clean, but you have to make sure you don't get angry when others don't live according to the way you want. So this Bhikkhuni, she is very, very clean and she likes to keep everything nice and tidy. And one day what she did is she swept around the stupa, and it was very clean. There was nothing, no dirt in it, and it was beautiful and nice. And another Bhikkhuni who passed by there, she suddenly sneezed and some snot was released from the nose and it fell on the ground. Okay. And when that bhikkhuni who just cleaned the ground around the stupa saw this, she quickly got angry. She quickly got angry and she said, "Who's this prostitute who just dirtied this ground?" And she didn't know that that bhikkhuni who sneezed, she was an Arahant bhikkhuni. So see, when we blurt out words impulsively without thinking twice, so she insulted an Arahant bhikkhuni for sneezing and dropping snot on the ground. Now she did not do that on purpose. Sneezing is something that comes as a bodily reaction, right? But she didn't think of it like that. She insulted that Arahant bhikkhuni. And it said from that life onwards, after that life, she was reborn in the hell world for accusing a bhikkhuni, and from that life onwards, every time she is reborn in the human world for hundreds of lives, every time she is born as a woman, and every time she ends up becoming a prostitute. She never gets the opportunity to get married. She's never loved by a man. She's never able to have a loving family. There's no one to talk to her lovingly. There's no one to call her mother. There's no one to call her wife. Right? From that life onwards, every time she is reborn in the human world after suffering in hell for a long time, she was reborn as a prostitute. That's why in the last life also, she ended up becoming a prostitute. But because she had collected merit and she had practiced the Dhamma, she somehow was able to escape from suffering. But if she didn't meet the Buddha in this Gautam Buddha's dispensation, then she would have to go on and take that karma that she did. Right? So that is the danger. So the ordinary mind, we always see other people's faults, we always see other people's weaknesses, and our nature, the ordinary nature is always to blurt out and point out those mistakes by saying you did this, you did that. Okay, so if a person practices this Dhamma and if a person tries to follow these conditions before we do so, then that really helps us to control our mind and it helps us to control ourselves so that we don't blurt out things and we do not behave in a way that is wrong and accumulate karma, and we can help another person to correct themselves and develop themselves further. Okay, so I think this sutta is a very important sutta which we can really practice practically in our lives if you're mindful, right? So the next time you feel like pointing your finger at someone, next time you feel like you want to correct someone, then quickly remember these 10 things. What are these 10 things? The first 5 is you should investigate and see whether you have these 5 factors, whether your physical actions are pure, whether your verbal actions are pure, or whether your mind is filled with anger or loving kindness, and whether you have a good Dhamma knowledge, and whether you have a good knowledge about the monastic rules. Okay? Because if you don't have these 5 things, then others can accuse you saying, you don't have the right to point your finger at others. You're also like this. So first, look at yourself and then establish yourself in these 5 factors, and that is, make sure when you're reproving someone, you do so at the right time. Okay, that you always make sure you investigate and find out the truth before you reprove somebody. And when you reprove someone, do so gently without hurting their feelings. And the fourth is, if you want to reprove someone, always do so with the intention of benefiting that person. And the fifth is, do so with a mind of loving kindness. So may all of us be able to practice this Dhamma concept in our lives, in our everyday lives, develop our mind, control our mind, speech, and body, and collect merit into our lives and realize the Four Noble Truths in this Gautam Buddha's dispensation. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.